The words still echo in my head, even now. I don't want you to touch me anymore. She said it like a statement of fact, not an accusation. And that's when the real cold began. It wasn't an explosion or a fight. It was just a quiet, almost clinical declaration, spoken late one Tuesday night as I reached for her in bed. My hand just stopped midair, a few inches from her arm, and then slowly fell back to my side. We'd been married for 7 years, and before that, together for 4 more. Physical touch had always been our language. It was how we connected, how we comforted each other, how we showed love without saying a word. Now it was just gone. For days I told myself it was stress. Maria had been under a lot of pressure at work. Her new project was demanding, and she was putting in long hours. We all get overwhelmed. Sometimes you just need space, even from the person you love most. I tried to be understanding, to give her that space. I stopped reaching out as often, held back my impulses to wrap an arm around her while we watched TV, or give her a quick hug when she walked past. It felt alien, but I figured it was temporary. But then the days turned into weeks, and the weeks bled into a month. The "don't touch me" hadn't been repeated verbally, but it didn't need to be. Her body language screamed it. If I moved too close on the couch, she'd shift away, subtly, almost imperceptibly. If I tried to kiss her goodbye in the morning, she'd offer her cheek, a quick peck, and then quickly turn back to whatever she was doing. It wasn't just a lack of initiation, it was an active avoidance. This wasn't just stress, this was something else. What confused me most was that it seemed to be just for me. I'd see her on video calls with her family, laughing easily, leaning into the camera. She'd come home from an outing with friends and recount stories, animated and full of energy. Her voice would lift, her eyes would sparkle. But when she talked to me, it was often clipped, efficient, or simply quiet. Our conversations became functional, revolving around chores, schedules, and bills. The lightness, the playfulness we once shared had evaporated. I started to feel like a stranger in my own home. I'd watch her from across the living room, scrolling through her phone, a small, private smile playing on her lips. Sometimes she'd actually laugh out loud, a genuine, joyful sound I rarely heard directed at me anymore. I'd ask what was so funny, hoping to share in it, and she'd just say, "Oh, just something online," and then quickly put the phone down or turn it away. It wasn't a secretive gesture, not exactly, but it felt guarded. My mind raced through possibilities. Was I doing something wrong? Had I offended her, hurt her, without realizing it? I replayed recent conversations, trying to pinpoint a moment, a word, a look that might have caused this seismic shift. I came up empty. Our life was stable. We had a good home, no major financial worries. Our routines were predictable. Nothing had changed on my end. At least, nothing I could identify. I tried talking to her, gently, one evening after dinner. "Hey, everything okay? You seem a little distant lately." She looked up from her plate, her expression neutral. "I'm fine, Mark. Just tired. Work is a lot." It was the same answer, delivered with the same flat tone. It felt like a wall, a polite, impenetrable wall. The more I tried to push through it, the thicker it seemed to get. The emotional distance started to manifest in other ways too. She used to tell me everything about her day, small details, frustrations, triumphs. Now, her summaries were brief. Work was fine. Lunch was okay. It was like pulling teeth to get any real information. I found myself feeling like I was interrogating her, which only made me feel worse. I didn't want to be that guy. I just wanted my wife back. Her phone became an extension of her hand, always within reach, often face down when she wasn't actively using it, but picked up constantly. Not just for quick checks, but for extended periods of focused attention. Sometimes, I'd see her quickly switch screens if I walked into the room, a subtle flick of her thumb. It could be nothing, just privacy, but combined with everything else, it started to prickle at my subconscious. One Saturday, I planned a small surprise, a quiet dinner at our favorite Italian place, just the two of us. I booked the table, picked up her favorite flowers, and even cleaned the kitchen. When I told her, her reaction was muted. "Oh, okay, I guess that sounds nice." There was no enthusiasm, no spark. It felt less like a romantic gesture and more like another item on her to-do list. The dinner itself was polite, almost stiff. She scrolled on her phone a couple of times under the table while I was talking, and when I asked her about it, she just said she was checking a work email. On a Saturday night, at a nice restaurant, I just nodded, a hollow feeling spreading in my chest. I started noticing her appearance more closely, too. Not that she'd let herself go, quite the opposite. She was spending more time getting ready in the mornings, choosing her outfits with more care. She bought a new perfume, a scent I didn't recognize, floral and sweet, very different from her usual musk. She'd say it was for work, to feel more professional, but the effort seemed to go beyond just presentation. She looked good, undeniably, but it wasn't for me. Or, at least, it didn't feel like it was. The compliments I offered were met with a perfunctory thanks. The nights were the hardest. We still slept in the same bed, but the space between us grew wider and wider. She'd turn her back to me almost immediately, pulling the covers tight around her. Sometimes, I'd lie there for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to her quiet breathing, feeling the overwhelming loneliness of being so close, yet so utterly alone. I wanted to reach out, to just hold her, to feel her warmth again. But the memory of her words, the absolute certainty of her rejection, held my hand back. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that if I touched her, she would pull away. And I couldn't bear that rejection again. The idea that she didn't want for my night touch, specifically, began to burn inside me, a quiet, insistent fire. The quiet, insistent fire of suspicion didn't extinguish with the morning light. Instead, it smoldered, coloring every interaction, every silence, every glance. It was a low-level hum beneath the surface of my days, a constant, nagging question that I tried to push down, but which always found its way back. I wanted to believe it was just stress, just us going through a phase, but Maria's behavior chipped away at that hope, piece by painful piece. Her phone, which had always been a casual part of her life, became an extension of her hand, a secret keeper. It was rarely out of her sight. If she stepped away from the table, it went with her. If she went to the bathroom, it went too. It was always face down on surfaces, a wall between her and anything that might accidentally be seen. Sometimes, I'd walk into a room, and she'd quickly swipe the screen, her eyes darting up at me with an almost imperceptible flicker of surprise. Or was it guilt? I couldn't tell. I tried to bridge the gap. I tried to talk to her about my day, about small things that used to make her laugh. I'd mention plans for the weekend, or a movie I thought we'd enjoy. Her responses were clipped, functional. "That's nice," or "okay," or a distracted hum. It wasn't just disinterest. It felt like a deliberate barrier, a refusal to engage beyond the absolute necessary. When I pressed, even gently, she'd sigh, or say she was tired, or accuse me of being needy. The words stung more than she knew. Her routine began to shift, too. What started as occasional late nights working morphed into more frequent instances of her needing space after work, or grabbing coffee with a friend on a Tuesday evening, often extending later than she'd initially implied. She always had an explanation, a plausible reason, but the sheer volume of these new engagements felt out of character. Our quiet evenings at home, which used to be our anchor, were slowly eroding. I found myself oscillating between fierce conviction and paralyzing self-doubt. Was I imagining things? Was I turning normal behavior into something sinister because of my own hurt? Maybe she was just under a lot of pressure at work. Maybe her friends need her more these days. Maybe I was being too sensitive. The thought that I was simply failing as a husband, that I was the problem, was a tempting, painful explanation. It was easier to blame myself than to face the creeping dread of something far worse. One evening, I walked into the living room and she was engrossed in her phone, a soft smile playing on her lips. She didn't hear me come in. I watched her for a moment, captivated by the easy warmth on her face, a warmth I hadn't seen directed at me in what felt like forever. Then, her thumb moved, tapping out a quick message, and I caught a glimpse of the screen. Not a text message, not an email. It was an app I didn't recognize, and a picture of a man's face flashed briefly before she quickly, almost violently, minimized the application and turned her head to acknowledge me, her smile gone, replaced by a strained politeness. "Everything okay, Mark?" she asked, a little too quickly. My heart pounded, but I simply nodded, mumbling something about dinner. Her appearance, which had always been effortless, now seemed more deliberate. New clothes appeared in her wardrobe, things I hadn't seen her wear before, styles a little bolder than her usual. She started wearing a new perfume too, a rich, floral scent that was distinctly different from her familiar, comforting fragrance. It was a beautiful scent, but it brought me no comfort. It felt like another layer of unfamiliarity. When I complimented her, trying to connect, she'd offer a quick, "Thanks," and then change the subject, as if the compliment made her uncomfortable. It was clear to me that this effort, this polished version of Maria, was not for my benefit. Our conversations became solely transactional. Bills, groceries, the dogs, scheduling. The easy banter, the shared jokes, the comfortable silences that spoke volumes, they were all gone. We were roommates, polite strangers sharing a space, navigating our lives around each other with careful avoidance. The emotional distance was a physical weight in the house, heavy and suffocating. I started eating dinner in silence, or with the TV on, just to fill the void. The loneliness became a gnawing emptiness inside me. I missed her touch, her laugh, her presence, but more than that, I missed us. The life we had built, the future we had planned, felt like a distant memory, slipping through my fingers. I lay awake most nights, staring at the ceiling, wondering where the Maria the first married had gone, and who this person was, sharing my bed. The rejection I felt wasn't just physical anymore, it was a rejection of our entire shared history. Then, there was the receipt. It wasn't anything major, just a small, almost insignificant detail. I was reconciling our joint credit card statement, something I did every month, without much thought. Amidst the usual grocery runs and utility payments, there was a charge for a boutique coffee shop across town. Not our usual place, not even close to her work or any friends she mentioned. It was a Saturday morning, a time she had told me she was running errands. The amount was small, under $10, but it wasn't the cost that bothered me. It was the location. Why would she go all the way across town for coffee when there were 3 cafes closer to our house, and even one within walking distance of her usual errands? It was a tiny thread, almost invisible, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I tried to bring up the distance between us, to talk about what was happening. One evening, after a particularly quiet dinner, I mustered all my courage. "Maria," I started, "I feel like we're drifting apart. Is everything okay? Is there something you want to talk about?" She put down her phone. Slowly, deliberately. Her eyes, usually so expressive, were blank. "Mark, we're fine," she said, her voice flat. "You're overthinking things. I'm just busy. Work is demanding. Can we just not do this right now?" Her tone was laced with irritation, and the conversation ended there. The door slammed shut in my face before I even had a chance to open it. Her busy schedule continued to escalate. She started getting texts late at night, sometimes after we had both gone to bed. Her phone would vibrate quietly, and she'd quickly grab it, turning away from me, her back a fortress. I pretended to be asleep, my heart hammering in my chest, straining to hear anything, to make sense of what was happening. Sometimes, she'd get up and go into the other room, whispering into the phone, the hushed tones echoing the secrecy that now permeated our home. The emotional distance grew so vast that I felt like I was living with a phantom, She was physically present but emotionally absent, a ghost in her own life, a ghost in our life. My initial theories of stress and exhaustion felt increasingly inadequate. This wasn't fatigue. This was a deliberate, calculated withdrawal. It was as if she had built a wall around herself, and I was on the outside, watching my marriage crumble through the cracks. One Tuesday, I arrived home unexpectedly early. My meeting had been canceled, and I thought I'd surprise Maria with dinner. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw her car. Good. She was home. But as I walked up to the front door, I heard muffled voices from inside. It wasn't the TV. It was Maria's voice, hushed and melodic, almost playful, followed by a deeper, male voice I didn't recognize. My hand paused on the doorknob. The murmuring stopped abruptly, and then I heard Maria's distinct, clear laughter. It wasn't the strained, polite laughter I sometimes heard from her these days. It was genuine, warm, and full of life. It was the laugh I used to hear, the one that used to be reserved for me, and it was coming from inside my house, just before I let myself in. My hand dropped from the doorknob. The genuine laughter, the male voice. It was like a punch to the gut, stealing the air from my lungs. I waited a beat, forcing myself to take a deep breath. Then I pushed the door open, trying to make it sound as normal as possible, trying to appear nonchalant. "Maria? I'm home early," I called out, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. The house was quiet, too quiet. I walked into the living room, then the kitchen, empty. "Maria?" I called again, a tremor in my voice I couldn't hide. She emerged from the hallway, looking perfectly composed, though her eyes had a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. Surprise, maybe a hint of annoyance, quickly masked. "Mark? What are you doing home?" she asked, her voice flat, devoid of the warmth I'd just heard. "Meeting canceled," I said, trying to smile. "Thought I'd surprise you. Was someone just here?" Her gaze didn't waver. "No, why? Just on the phone with Sarah. She's hilarious sometimes." Sarah, the friend I'd never heard her laugh like that with, not even in person. I studied her face, looking for any tell. Nothing. She looked at me expectantly, a subtle challenge in her eyes. I let it go, the lie hanging in the air between us like a physical weight. The smell of fresh coffee still lingered faintly, but I told myself it could have been from her call with Sarah, an elaborate setup. But the genuine laugh, that was harder to dismiss. From that moment, my perception of our home shifted. It wasn't just a place of quiet discomfort. It was a stage where I was constantly watching, waiting for the next scene to unfold. Maria's phone became an obsession. It was always with her, always face down, always just out of reach. If I entered a room, she'd instinctively pull it closer, or quickly switch screens, sometimes with a faint click of a button that was too fast for me to register what she was hiding. It became a morbid game of cat and mouse, a silent battle for information. A few days later, I found a small, dark red stain on the kitchen counter, near where she usually placed her phone. It looked like lipstick, a shade I'd never seen her wear. Maria preferred subtle nudes and pinks. This was a deep, bold crimson. I picked it up, trying to wipe it away, but it had dried. I glanced at Maria, who was engrossed in something on her laptop. When she looked up, I quickly covered the stain with my hand. She asked what I was doing. "Just cleaning," I mumbled, feeling like a thief in my own home. The lipstick stain vanished, but the unsettling image of it didn't. Was she trying a new look for herself, or for someone else? My own phone became a tool. I started checking our shared bank statements more closely. There were the usual charges, groceries, utilities, a new dress for Maria. But then I saw it, a recurring charge for a local high-end coffee shop, The Daily Grind, 3 times in the last month. It wasn't far from her work, but it wasn't her usual place. She always went to the chain coffee shop next door to her office. These charges were for amounts like $12.50 or $15.75, implying multiple drinks or a small snack. It was always on a Monday or a Wednesday afternoon, around 3 p.m., an hour or so before she usually came home. I didn't say anything. I just stared at the screen, the numbers blurring, the question burning in my mind. I tried to initiate conversation, to bridge the growing chasm between us. "How was your day?" I'd ask. "Fine," she'd reply, without elaboration. "Anything interesting happen?" "No, same old." Her eyes would dart to her phone, resting on the table beside her plate. I'd try to recall the Maria who used to tell me every detail of her day, the funny things a coworker said, her frustrations, her small victories. That Maria was gone, replaced by this guarded, almost impatient stranger. The silence at dinner became oppressive, filled with the unspoken questions and the palpable distance. One evening, I watched her get ready for what she called girls' night out. She spent an hour on her hair, put on a new, form-fitting dress I hadn't seen before, and applied that deep red lipstick I'd found a stain of. She dabbed on the new perfume, and the scent filled the bathroom. Sweet, musky, completely foreign to me. She looked stunning. "You look beautiful," I said genuinely. She glanced in the mirror, gave a small, almost dismissive nod. "Thanks," she said, her voice flat. She was getting ready for an audience, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that audience wasn't me. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I heard her come in, much later than her usual girls' night end time. I heard her moving around in the bathroom, then slipping into bed. I pretended to be asleep, my heart pounding. The next morning, I woke up before her. As I got out of bed, I noticed a tiny, crumpled receipt on the floor beside her side of the bed. It was from the Daily Grind, dated last night. Not only was she there, but it was late. The timestamp was 10:47 p.m. And the items weren't just coffee. There was a slice of cheesecake and 2 cappuccinos. Sarah didn't like cheesecake, and Maria always drank decaf tea at night. The pieces started to click into place, forming a picture I desperately didn't want to see. The late-night texts, the whispered calls, the Sarah explanation for the male voice, the coffee shop charges, the sudden interest in her appearance, the new perfume, the vibrant lipstick, the genuine laugh she no longer shared with me. It was all beginning to make an awful, terrifying kind of sense. My stomach churned, a cold dread spreading through my veins. I had to know. My denial, my hope, was being systematically dismantled by Maria's actions. I started taking small detours past her work on my way home, just to see her car, to confirm she was there. One Tuesday around 3:15 p.m., I drove slowly past the Daily Grind, my heart hammered against my ribs. And there, through the large glass window, was Maria, sitting at a small table in the corner. She was laughing, her head thrown back, the red lipstick stark against her teeth. Across from her sat a man. His back was to me, but I could see his hand on hers, resting casually on the table. I drove past, numb. The picture was seared into my mind. Her hand, his hand, the laughter. The way she looked at him, completely engaged, radiant, the way she used to look at me. I kept driving, not knowing where I was going, the world outside my car window blurring into an indistinguishable mess of colors. I felt sick, hollowed out. There was no denying it now, no explaining it away. The coldness, the distance, the lies. It wasn't just stress, it wasn't just exhaustion, it was him. And Maria. My world had just shattered into a million tiny, painful pieces. And I had nowhere to go, no one to tell. I drove for what felt like hours, even though it was probably only 30 minutes. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, but I saw none of it. My vision was fixed on an internal loop. Maria's laugh, her hand in his, the way her eyes lit up. It was a replay of a memory that hadn't even had time to settle yet. My chest felt hollow, like something vital had been scooped out. I kept driving until the gas light came on, then pulled over into a deserted parking lot. The silence of the car was deafening. I just sat there, staring at nothing, letting the reality sink in. Eventually, the chill of the evening air through the vents forced me to move. I topped off the tank and headed home. The house was dark when I arrived. Maria wasn't back yet. I went through the motions, parking the car, unlocking the door, stepping inside. Each action felt heavy, deliberate, as if I were moving through water. I walked into the kitchen, the remnants of our dinner from the night before, still faintly visible on the counter. The image of her at the daily grind with him clashed violently with the domestic scene around me. The contrast was a punch to the gut. I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. I had to face her. I had to face it all. I sat in the living room, in the dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside. My phone was dead. I hadn't even thought to charge it. It didn't matter. There was no one I wanted to talk to, nothing I wanted to distract myself with. The minutes stretched into an eternity. I heard her car pull into the driveway, the familiar crunch of tires on gravel, the engine cut, followed by the soft click of her car door. Then, the sound of her key in the lock. Each sound was amplified, echoing in the quiet house, echoing in my head. She stepped inside, humming softly. She flipped on the light in the entryway. She didn't see me at first, still focused on kicking off her shoes. She looked good, dressed up, the same red lipstick I'd noticed earlier. She must have reapplied it. She was still humming. That sound, that casual joy, after what I'd seen, felt like a betrayal in itself. She walked past the living room, heading towards the kitchen, and then she stopped. She saw me, sitting in the dark. Her humming died. "Mark, what are you doing in here?" Her voice was sharp, a little defensive. She hadn't expected me. I stood up, slowly. My legs felt strangely heavy. "I could ask you the same thing, Maria. Where have you been?" My voice was calm, almost flat. I was surprised by its steadiness. She bristled. "Out, with Sarah. You know girls. Night. I told you." Her tone was dismissive, an old habit. "Did you have a good time with Sarah at the daily grind?" I asked, my gaze steady on her. Her eyes flickered, a tiny pause, almost imperceptible. "Yeah, it was good. Why?" "Because I drove past the daily grind earlier tonight," I continued, taking a step closer, "and Sarah wasn't there." Her jaw tightened. "What are you talking about? Of course she was there." She tried to sound indignant, but her voice wavered slightly. "No, Maria. Sarah wasn't there," I repeated, my voice still even. "But you were, and you weren't alone." She stared at me, her eyes wide, then narrowed. For a moment, I thought she might still try to deny it. Part of me almost wanted her to see how far she would go. But the words were out. The truth was between us. The air in the room grew heavy, suffocating. She swallowed hard, her gaze dropping from mine. "Who was he, Maria?" I asked, the question hanging in the silence. "The man whose hand you were holding, the man you were laughing with, genuinely laughing, the way you used to laugh with me." She flinched. The red lipstick seemed to stand out against her suddenly pale face. She walked to the kitchen island, leaning on it, her back to me. Her shoulders slumped. It's not what you think," she mumbled, her voice barely a whisper. "Isn't it?" I felt a sharp, bitter laugh bubble up, but I suppressed it. "Because I think it's exactly what I think. The coldness, the phone, the late nights, the coffee shop receipts, the whispers, the sudden early morning returns to find you laughing with him in our house. It's been him all along, hasn't it?" She turned, her eyes glazed with tears but also a flicker of anger. "You've been spying on me." "I've been trying to understand why my wife disappeared on me, why she stopped wanting me to touch her, why she started treating me like a ghost in my own home," I said, the pain finally breaking through my calm facade. "I didn't want to know this, Maria. I didn't want to see this, but you made it impossible to ignore." She started to cry then, soft, ragged sobs that shook her body. "I'm sorry, Mark. I'm so sorry." "Sorry for what, Maria?" I asked, my voice flat again. "Sorry you got caught, or sorry for what you did?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face, smearing the red lipstick. "Sorry for all of it. I messed up, I know. It happened." "When?" I pressed. "When did it happen? When did we become him?" She hesitated, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "A few months ago. It was just coffee, and then it escalated." "A few months," I repeated, the timeline confirming my suspicions about the increasing distance. "So when you told me you didn't want my touch anymore, that was because of him?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. She nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "Yes, I know it was cruel, Mark. I didn't mean to hurt you like that." "But you did," I said. "You did hurt me. You broke everything." "His name is David," she volunteered, almost as if to fill the silence, or perhaps to offer a piece of the truth she felt was owed. "He works in the building next to mine." The information landed with a thud, mundane and devastating at the same time. David. Just a name, but it represented the shattering of my world. "So, was he here, Maria? In our house? That day I came home early?" I asked, recalling the male voice and laughter. She nodded, her head bowed. "Yes, he came over a couple of times." My stomach churned. The intimacy of it, the violation of our home, was almost worse than the affair itself. "I can't do this, Maria," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't look at you right now. I can't be in the same room as you." She looked up, her eyes pleading. "Mark, please, can we talk? Can we fix this?" "Fix this?" I echoed, the word feeling utterly foreign. How do you fix something that's been broken so completely? How do you unsee what I saw? How do you unfeel the last few months of feeling like I was losing my mind, only to find out you were just with someone else? I turned and walked away, towards the spare bedroom. My mind was reeling, the weight of the confession settling over me like a suffocating blanket. I grabbed a pillow and a blanket from the linen closet. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I'm sleeping in the spare room," I told her, not looking back. "And tomorrow we need to figure out what happens next, because I don't know if there's an us anymore." I closed the spare room door behind me, leaning against it, my eyes squeezed shut. The silence was back, but now it was different. It was no longer the silence of suspicion, but the silence of an undeniable truth. A truth that had ripped through everything I thought I knew. I had feared this moment for so long, wrestled with my doubts, tried to rationalize her distance. And now it was real. The coldness wasn't just stress, wasn't just exhaustion. It was him. And the touch she didn't want was mine. My world had indeed shattered. But now I knew why. And in that knowing, there was a terrible, painful clarity. The path ahead was dark and uncertain, but at least now I could see it.